from a marketability perspective, I do understand and realize that connectivity matters, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes connectivity can be love. Sometimes connectivity can be a disdain for you. But regardless, it's what sells, right?
Yeah.
And that's what those debate shows have really understood. So certain people hate Skip, certain people love it, but they watch him because of that connectivity, whether it's a love or hate relationship. I think sometimes that even works with athletes. I think that's why Floyd Mayweather was so made so much money, not just because he was a great talent, but it's because either people loved him or people wanted to pay to watch to see him take that out. But it was
Hmm.
that connectivity. So, and for me as an athlete or as an agent, it's always trying to figure out ways to create connectivity with the multiple silos of fans that you can connect with in different capacities, because that is what increases your value of your brand.
Social media is simply a great thing. I say it all the time. It has allowed me to keep up with people whom I went to high school with. My guest on today's episode is a guy who is the star of our high school football team, and now he's a certified NBA agent, and that is the one and only Anthony Johnson. Anthony, University of Maryland graduate, as well as a Morgan State University graduate, is also a member of the Renaissance Sports Group. So, ladies and gentlemen, he comes on today to share what it's like being an NBA agent, the process, and everything that if you're interested in this line of work, you need to understand. Here's my conversation with Anthony Johnson. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, Breaking Through the Glass Ceiling, I bring on a fellow Baltimore City College Knight. I'm gonna tell you, he humble, but he was one of the stars of the football team. He did some damage out there on the field. We'll get into that story after I finish this introduction. But the one and only Anthony Johnson. Anthony, how you doing, bro?
Hey man, thanks for having me. I needed that stamp, so whenever I do have kids, I can play it back so they believe me.
Look, I'll never forget my first year. So you a year younger than me. My first year, once you graduate, well, see, I ain't go away to college. So that first game of the season, I was right there, y'all first home game. And it was me and
Oh,
my boy, Alan. Alan didn't go to City, but, it was my best friend. So I was like, yo, let's go to this City game. I don't even remember who y'all was playing. And I remember y'all won by a blowout. But I'll never
I think it was
forget.
Lake Clifton.
Okay, you was shaking and baking, and you hit a spin move, and the whole crowd like,
Now that was a good game for me, man. I think I had 3 touchdowns that game, man. It was a
yup.
good one.
And then he just kept saying, "Yo, number one is out there killing." I said, "Ant Mo, man."
I appreciate that, man. That was good times. I don't know if I can move like that today.
Oh, come on, man! Don't tell me that. But you play high school football, man. Can you just talk about that experience, especially a school like that? Baltimore City College, third oldest high school. You obviously had a City Poly game, which is a big game, a big deal. But can you talk about what it meant to play high school football, being a sports fan?
Man, I think especially particularly at City, obviously you had the City Poly thing that really puts it on a grander stage, and it gives you a different perspective. You get to play in an NFL stadium, which you get to go in the NFL locker room, and those type of things I think are really cool experiences for any high school student athlete. But I also think the tradition is really what kind of sets City apart. Or, well, I would say some high schools in the city have that same or similar traditions, but not to the degree of a City or a Poly. Um, I think that tradition is kind of what kind of puts more of I would say, a pedestal, or puts more of some pressure on you in some capacity. But I also feel like Baltimore, at least on my time, was different, and because we were pre-YouTube to some degree. Like I was the year before YouTube kind of took off. So as far as just getting exposure and getting that visibility, um, it was more of a journey in the process. I was from the era in which I'm making my highlight tape via VHS, not digitally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that process was a different type of grind, even to get that exposure and visibility. But also, I think it gave you more of an appreciation for the people who are involved in that process, but also yourself in that journey, and that that it kind of was a humbling experience. That whatever opportunity would have come my way, it would have made me more appreciative of it.
Was it expensive when you brought up the pre-YouTube era, pre-digital? Was it really expensive when you was going out there trying to send your highlight tapes to different colleges?
Well, I would say yes. So I was fortunate enough that I was a good student as well as an athlete. So I applied all the colleges that I got accepted into, and I got accepted into a lot of them. I sent my highlight tapes to them.
Okay.
So that wasn't free to mail out all of those highlight tapes. I don't remember the cost at the moment, but it wasn't like thousands of dollars, and not even maybe not hundreds of dollars. But for a high school student who's putting that up, who's paying that money and putting it out themselves, it was
Hmm.
expensive to me at that time, at least,
Yeah.
because I didn't have no like a really like support or someone giving me as much guidance as it pertains to how to do that. It was me and my mom, obviously, who fortunately we was a single parent household, so it was a process of the journey and kind of learning in that process just through experience.
Now you mentioned one thing that you was a good student. You would go to Maryland. When did you like? How was you able to balance football and the work? Because for anybody who don't know, City, like we mentioned earlier, one of the top schools, not just about the City Poly game, but it's a prestigious school. You have to make sure you maintain a certain average to stay there. So how was you able to balance that? And if I'm not mistaken, weren't you in advanced classes as well, like IB and pre-IB and stuff?
Yeah, I was in several advanced classes at City Advanced Academic. I think that's what it was called at that time. Now I can say I was fortunate enough. I'm not gonna say school wasn't hard for me. I mean, I think I was a pretty good student, and I think even pre City College going to Roland Park to some degree helped prepare me for City College to some degree. Um, I think though I was always focused and I always took my education seriously. Like for me, it's funny. I was just having a conversation with one of my friends, and I don't believe I never got my first C was when I was in college.
Okay.
So like C, B, A was good, a B was okay, but for me, like if I'd have got a C, I'd have probably been like distraught at that point in high school. But for me, like man, I just took my academics and education very seriously, and I would have liked to make it professionally being an athlete, but I always knew I wanted to go to college and my mind could be a tool. So I
Mhm.
wanted to leverage it in that capacity.
Did you have the mindset? I've heard Shannon Sharp said, no, it was Jerry. I think it was Jerry Rice. Um, Said he told a coach one time that, hey, you're using me, so I'm gonna use you for a free education. So, had you gone and played sports, would that have been your mindset? Education first, do you think?
That's a great hypothetical question. I feel like college isn't just about education.
Mhm.
I think college is about just how you leverage the opportunities that you present within. So whether I'm a student or student athlete, I think I would have been focused on leveraging all the opportunities that presented themselves, whether that been through networking, associations, the opportunities of networking as a student athlete and being around those people. My focus would have been leveraging those opportunities from an academic perspective, from a business perspective, and from a networking perspective holistically. That's how I would have probably approached it.
Yeah,
Because I feel
okay.
like college is what you make it.
Right. Now, when did you know that you wanted to go to Maryland?
Um,
And what?
Maryland definitely was one of my top schools that I wanted to go to.
Okay.
At one point, I was kind of considering going away to schools at potentially a friend of mine's, B. Walker, actually.
Yeah, B
Played
Walk. Shout out to
played
Brandon.
Yeah, I played football with him. He was trying to get me to come to Bethune-Cookman and play the date to sunny Florida, and I was really contemplating it. I had then I was a big actually from a football perspective. I was a big University of Miami, Florida Gator fan. The only other institution I would considered a little bit more than Maryland may have been the University of Miami.
Okay.
But all the other institutions, the UVAs and a lot of the other, Division 1A and some of the HBCUs, um, I chose Maryland over them. But the University of Miami was the only school that put me on the wait list. Every other school I just got accepted into. They put me on the wait list, but once I was seeing how much it would have cost to attend that university
Mhm.
as essentially as essentially an out-of-state student, how much it would have costed me to attend the University of Miami. Um, it just ain't make sense financially. And Maryland was offering me some potential academic scholarships, and I felt like it was close enough, but also far enough that it was outside of the city of Baltimore. So it was a win-win in that capacity for me.
All right, so one of the things that you while you were at University of Maryland, well, I shouldn't say one of the things, but you would get your bachelor's in sports management, business, and communications. And when did you know like that was the route that you wanted to go? Did you automatically know that coming out of high school, or was it once you got to school? Like, did you have to have that find yourself time as far as what you wanted to do career wise when you got to college, or you already knew?
Um, so when I was in college, I knew in high school if I wasn't playing sports professionally, I was going to work in the industry professionally. An agent was something. Actually, one of my mentors at the time was an agent too. Um, so I got some immediate visibility. I would say more so like a flash mentor.
Mhm.
I had some visibility from someone that I knew that was tangible, who was an agent in that space. But also, when I got to University of Maryland, I knew at that point, I knew either I was going to be an agent, or my goal was either to be an agent or to run a major sports corporation. So even while at the university, that's why I interned for the sports marketing program. I was involved with a lot of different sports associations and those type of things because I wanted to really network and get my feet wet and just build as many relationships as I could. So, and even with like going back to my sports management major, the irony of that is it's not actually a major at the University of Maryland.
Okay.
So the University of Maryland has this thing called the Individual Studies Program, in which you have the capacity to create your own major. So when you're talking about like communication and business, so when I created my own major, I had the autonomy to kind of make it and mold it how I wanted, but also make it distinctly different than some of the other sports management programs that was in the area. And I actually had to validate that because I had to like propose it, pitch it right at some 30-page theses and a whole bunch of other stuff just to
Oh
validate
wow.
being in this major. You get what I'm saying? So that
Yeah.
from early on, I had to be serious about sports, right?
Mhm.
Um, so that kind of also, I think, kind of helped put me on a more of a steadfast path, or direction to really working in that space and taking it a little bit more seriously. But in that program, it was a cool experience, man, because it made my major a little bit unique because I was able to pick what I felt like made sense, taking some kinesiology, sports marketing management courses, taking very much business fundamental courses, as well as the communication, the nonverbal, the public speaking, all those things that would give me an academic foundation that would be applicable to where I'm trying to go.
All right. Now, is there any time where it mixes with you mentioned the communications? Is there any time where it mixes in with journalism at any point during that process?
It depends. Do you count social media as journalism?
Well, I think you have to now, right? But
So
at
in
that
that
time,
capacity, yes.
okay, was there like how much was there social media training when you was at Maryland versus, I'm pretty sure now you can have two, three, you can have a major in social media, but you at that time this is pre-Twitter or like Twitter's starting to jump off if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, well, Twitter was, but Facebook was already out there. So my training
Mhm.
was through my experiences. So
Okay.
while at the University of Maryland, I was working with the sports marketing program. So not only are we doing marketing as far as event logistics and in-game announcements and sponsorships and in-game promos, I also eventually got promoted from an intern to a marketing coordinator.
Mhm.
And then as a marketing coordinator, did the marketing promotion for various sports. So I did the marketing promotion for lacrosse and field hockey at the university. So that wasn't just like creating the events, but that was also creating the Facebook pages for these, creating the content, sharing. So I got some real life experience and I was able to manage social media profiles for Division 1 teams. And
Mhm.
that was like for me, that was some quality experience that I could really take and validate myself moving forward.
Yeah. Did you have any cool sports memories that happened during that time with the University of Maryland? Like, was there a football game, that a big game that you may have worked up on, or I should say, been there when it happened? Like, do you have any type of any of those type of memories?
Yeah, I have plenty, man. Cool thing about being when you were doing like the Maryland Sports Marketing Program is that we're literally courtside. So we're
Okay.
literally like at the court. So I seen all of the JJ Redick's play, all of the Maryland and Duke games before we left to go to the Big Ten. I
Mm-hmm.
was there. All of the Maryland and North Carolina games, I was there. So I was there. And even for football, I was fortunate enough to be right there on the sideline. So I knew a lot of the athletes and had some relationships with them. Just from one, just being at a frat partying, but also seeing them on the sideline. So it might just be like, hey, I'm giving them a pound saying good luck with the game right
Yeah.
there. But Maryland, man, had some really good. I remember we ran. I don't think I was in the program at that time. I remember we rushed the field when I think Maryland beat University of Miami for football. I remember running on the court before. I think we might have beat Duke at Maryland. It was either Duke or North Carolina running on the court. And that was just a fun. If you could bottle that energy up, man, and take it with you and sell it, it would be. It's different. And then from like a
Wow.
college basketball game, uh, when it's a big top 5, top 10, because Maryland was good at that time when I was there. They're definitely good now, but they were good at that time as well. There was a national championship Maryland. I wasn't there when Juan Dixon was there, but I was
Right.
actually there. I I was actually there when the women won too, and that was
Okay.
another thing, like the riots itself. So the
Oh,
riots when they won the national championship, that was crazy too.
did you get a chance to go to the tournaments, like the NCAA tournaments, while you were in college?
Um, I believe I went to one, but for not for so the irony is for soccer because in my role I worked the NCAA tournament.
Hmm.
So that's something that's just on my resume. I was working the NCAA tournaments, the ACC tournaments, because Maryland was hosting some of these other smaller sports, not like the football and basketball. I'm not sure if I went to a. I want to say I went to something at the Verizon Center, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember.
Okay. Now, when did you decide that you were going to go to graduate school, and what made you choose Morgan State University?
Um, Being an agent was a major driver for me going
Mhm.
to grad school to some degree. In my research, initially at one point I wanted to be an NBA, NFL agent before I became an NBA agent,
Okay.
and not long after that, the NFL started to add more barriers to entry as it pertains to the agency space. So they now you didn't necessarily need an undergraduate; they made it so you had to have a master's degree in order to even apply to be an agent for the NFL. So I was contemplating law or MBA. And my research was through my research, I just was looking at one, the agent option, but also the heads of like different sports organizations and what was their background. And a lot of them had MBA background. So I was kind of torn whether I wanted to go to law school or whether I wanted to do the MBA route. And again, what I told you initially was for me, success was either being an agent or the head of a major sports corporation. So I wanted to position myself based off of what I had seen thus far. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go with MBA.
Okay.
Now, as far as the institutions, I was kind of, I could say I wanted to some degree to get an HBCU experience.
Hmm.
Um, I was one of the other institutions that I didn't go to, but I was contemplating heavily was Hampton, like as an
Uh,
undergraduate. But Hampton, their rules were just too much for me, right? Like as an undergraduate, like they were like no visitation and everything, and I'm like, Hampton's a great institution. I liked it, what I seen, like what I heard,
mhm.
the packaging of it. But then I was like, no visitation. The rules were just so strenuous. And then when I got to Maryland, I'm like, they giving me money, and the girls on the same floor as us. It was just a different type of perspective. Like, nah, I'm gonna go ahead and just do something. I'm gonna go ahead and stick with this.
Mhm.
But I didn't look into Hampton for MBA. My MBA options were more so. I was really strongly considering Howard, UB, and Morgan. And in full transparency, I don't think I had the GPA to get into one of those programs. I can't remember which one it was, but I felt like Morgan was very much open, and I met with them, and I just really liked the vibe and the opportunities they were presenting to me. And
Mhm.
once I really got into the program, it was all love as far as Morgan MBA, going to the Black MBA conferences, and they were just doing some things, and they were really trying to rev up their MBA program, and
Okay.
really like. And now it's obviously they got the new building that's super fancy now, but they were really
Yeah.
trying to rev it up I think when I was getting involved, and I think they were more open and more, I guess, adamant about, being open to different people coming into the program, and I appreciated that. So I'm glad I chose Morgan.
Now you talked about with the process and becoming an agent. For people out there who don't know, can you explain to them that process? I'll be straight up. Like, I was torn at one time. My god brother, he had studied sports management at Towson. He ultimately um, changed his major to, what was it, criminal justice. But he had brought up sports management. So I was like, oh, okay. So, he's 4 years older than me. So he talked to me about it. And I had thought about it. Ultimately, I remember when I was at community college, one thing you brought up earlier was about considering law school. And that's what somebody in community college told me, one of the advisors. But I ultimately went with broadcast communications. But for people out there who think you can just find somebody and just be like, oh, okay, or I'm your agent, or latch on, lack of a better word, latch on to their best friend who's going up. Can you just talk about the process in becoming an agent and, getting certified?
Yeah, man. So all the leagues have their different standard policies, but they're similar, they're parallels. So
Mhm.
all of them are one going to do a background check to some degree. So depending on your criminal record, one, you might not be able to qualify
Oh.
for any of those leagues, right? Secondly, they're going to now all of them almost has some type of written examination upon which they're examining you for your knowledge of their collective bargaining agreements.
Mhm.
Each league has their own CBA. It's not a one size fits all. Um, Thirdly, there's going to be some type of financial payment that you have to put up. It's going to be at least $1,000 to $1,500, I believe, across the leagues. Some of them are like 2,500 or more. So that's another thing. Uh, Lastly, is the academic prerequisite, and that's going to vary by league. The NFL, I believe, has the highest barrier to entry as far as meaning they require a master's degree.
Mhm.
So and to that just gives you the option to sit on the examination. By the way, now it varies by NBA, NFL. At one point, you didn't need these certifications. Maybe 10 years ago, you didn't need a graduate degree or undergraduate degree at all. But as more people got involved and it became more popularity, they found more ways to create more barriers. Because and there was some validity to it because maybe some players were complaining about the agents and the quality of services that they were receiving. So I get that. Um, and I feel like, am I missing anything else? Also, there's going to be differences in how the examinations are scored.
Mhm.
The NFL might only require you to have a 60 or 70%. The NBA, I believe, requires you to have at least like a 80 or 85 to pass the exam. And they are graded differently. The NFL kind of treats theirs more like a percentile of the group, your testing group. The NBA kind of treats it more like, hey, just a raw score out of 60 questions, you got to get X amount of right, and that's your score. So it's a lot of variance based off of each league. But what I will say, if somebody's really interested, each players association normally has that information. But just understand it's not a one size fit all. But the similarities is you're gonna have to pay something. You're gonna have to pass a background check. You're gonna need some type of academic background as it pertains to just sitting on the examination, and more importantly, you got to pass the examination. Now, with the NBA, now they've added another layer, not the NBA itself, but now the NCAA is coming out with their own certification for agents, but it's only for basketball players. So that's a whole nother deal that we're dealing with now.
Wow. Were you nervous when you took the test?
Um, to some degree, yes,
Okay.
because I mean you're basically taking a test for your what you might believe is your dream position.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of pressure. And you put it's money on the line because you paid to sit in that examination, man. But I
Yeah.
can say I've taken both, and I personally feel like the NBA exam is a lot more straightforward. And part of it is the structure that contracts and those type of things too that may make it more straightforward. Um, but I was comfortable, and I'm glad it panned out how it did, as it pertains to me being an NBA agent instead of the NFL.
Now, do you have to get recertified?
Yeah. So one, if you don't have a client within 5 years, you got to get recertified anyway.
Okay.
Um, but not annually, but if we pay dues
Hmm.
to the Play Association. I can't remember the top of my head. I think it's like $1,500, $2,000 we got to pay every year. And that
Okay.
number goes up depending on the amount of players you have. I think if you have more than 9 players, I think it's 2,000. But if it's more than 9 players, it might be, I can't remember what's the tier. I haven't got there yet. It's not my problem at the moment. But
Okay.
you pay that annually, and if you don't pay that, you lose your certification.
Okay. And what's it like trying to build that relationship with players? Me knowing you the way I do, I know you're not just somebody who just doing something to be doing it. Like it's passion. You're gonna show that you care. You're gonna make sure you take care of your client. So what's that?
Question.
Huh?
I said, no question, man. It's definitely something that's important to me personally.
Yeah. So like how, and especially during a pandemic now, how are you able to basically sell yourself to them to help them understand? And what are some of the challenges you find during this time?
Excuse me. So for one, for me, man, because I've been an agent not that long, each year has been something new, right? So first year I'm trying to get my feet wet. Then the next year is COVID, where it's a whole new dynamic and everybody's kind of chicken with their head cut off. But to answer your question, um, and let me make sure I understand the question again. You said, how do I recruit players essentially?
Yeah, like basically how you recruit, what's your process in trying to get them to understand that you're trustworthy?
Man, I think for me, I've always been a straight shooter.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to sell you a dream because I feel like it's sexy or it's what you want to hear. So I think that honesty is always key. And I
Hmm.
think players tend to kind of can read the truth and how you're engaging with them, whether you're selling, and you can still sell and be authentic to who you are. But I think that authenticity and honesty is key, and that's the essence of who I am. But I also think that it's a big in having points of connectivity. So being it shouldn't be the only thing that differentiates you. You should be able to provide quality work. But I think being able to connect on multiple levels, and particularly as a Black man in a space that's not necessarily dominated by us, that can be a point of differentiation because if you are well versed and a Renaissance man, right?
Hmm.
You can wear many hats and talk a lot of different languages, and I think that's added value, at least for me, if you're able to speak those many languages well. So I think that's another point of differentiation, but also a point of connectivity, which is ultimately how you recruit. You connect. And I think you have to not only just be able to have the ability to connect to the players, but the parents. So whoever maybe they're some people call them their gatekeepers, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes those gatekeepers are their mentors, their trainers, their AAU coaches, their collegiate coaches, and so on and so on. So I think for me, I'm just going to be authentically who I am, but also be intentional about what I'm conveying, but also be intentional about the vision that I have for them
Mhm.
as I'm trying to grow. Not only just, I don't want to just be a transactional relationship, but I want something to be intentional about creating a movement to not only for them and their brand, but the culture holistically.
Okay. Now I know you Renaissance Sports Group. That's the company you work with. Is like how
Yep.
does that work as far as are you a part of a big team of agents or is it just you? Like can you like elaborate on it a little bit as much as you
So
can?
yeah, we're not like a CAA, a super team, a super agency, right? We're a
Okay.
small boutique agency. Now I do have a small team of like designers, graphic people, marketing people, and then certain things that we also outsource. And that's to some degree that's by design,
Hmm.
um, because I feel like sometimes when you keep everything in house, it can limit you to only working to certain types of people's creatives and minds. And for me personally, as I go through this journey with my clients, I not only want to be able to provide quality service, but I want to be able to educate them about the processes and give them the autonomy to select and not necessarily always be in a funnel
Hmm.
unless they want to trust you. Hey man, you pick this accountant, you pick this guy, you pick that, then cool. I think part of the reasons as to why some athletes have consistently gone broke is because they're trusting people to make the decision and they don't really understand sometimes how to make the decision for themselves. So as an agent, I'm going to have the ability and the knowledge to make those decisions if you want me to. But I'm also willing to take you through that process or give you the autonomy to make decisions, but give you very quality options to pick from. So to answer your question, we have a small team, but it's certain things that we outsource, and then outsourcing, I might give you two or three of one option and give you the autonomy. Let's have a meeting with these people, see what services they provide and what's your thoughts on it, and take it from there. But the athletes are learning and kind of we're fostering Renaissance men, which is our goal as an agency too. We're not just getting a check from you.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to you brought up like understanding the CBA and everything. Does that change a lot of times how you consume sports, especially when trades happen, or just being a general fan? By you knowing how the business works, does it change how you? Where, like, say for instance, I'm a Lakers fan. I'll get mad if Anthony Davis leaves the Lakers after, hopefully they win the championship. But you may look at it do you look at it from a different point, or are you able to separate your fandom from your business mind?
Um, that's a tough question. I feel yes, I can separate my fandom from my business mind. Um, it would probably be harder to do for football because that's my first love, right?
Okay.
But basketball, I can kind of really keep that business hat and compartmentalize the two. Now, I do get irritated when I hear sometimes fans just blurting out stuff without any context, but also because I'm more of like a analytical person when it comes to approaching things and having perspectives anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like generalizations, and I feel like sometimes as fans we tend to generalize. Oh, LeBron is the worst, or he's the best, whatever,
Yeah.
without really any context or stats or numbers to support it. So that irritates me as an agent. And for me as a fan, to some degree, I'm even like data driven as far as like how I look at certain things, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of my approach, even as to how not all data driven, but how I pursue certain clients,
Mm-hmm.
how I'm going to approach the construction of their contracts and those type of things, is to have some type of data foundation, because the reality is that's how scouts are now making decisions too. So
Mm-hmm.
you
Stay
gotta
ahead.
work in there. Yeah.
So you're not a you understand you. I guess to say you don't ignore the sabermetrics and all that stuff.
Oh, no question.
Because I know, like, from a broadcaster standpoint, um, like a lot of my mentors, they hate this first take undisputed era of journalism. Shout out to Milton Kent, former writer for the Baltimore Sun, now professor at Morgan State. I remember when we was in school and we would be in the dean's office, and he would walk in to see first take on, and he was like, "Oh, see, this is the problem." And his issue was that when he's trying to teach us the fundamentals of sports writing, understand the scores, how to write stats, how to write down, how to tell a story of a game in the paper. You got these guys on TV just yapping back and forth. So that's what happened when people come to class. They just wanted to talk sports. They didn't want to learn the actual craft of journalism. So
Uh,
yeah, a lot of I guess the old school people don't really like looking at a lot of the debate shows. But from the flip side, I know when I was at ESPN, there was I got there shortly after Jamie Horowitz left. He's the one who created First Take. At the time, it was Numbers Never Lie, which would become His and Hers. And then he went to CBS for it, literally a day, then went to Fox, and then eventually recruited Skip Bayless over. And that's where first Undisputed started. So I understood, like, from the business side, that's what's drawing the ratings. First Take was the highest rated and probably still is ESPN's highest rated show. But I also understood, like, the foundation is, because what people fail to realize, a lot of younger people don't know, like, yes, Stephen A. Smith was a journalist. Skip Bayless was a journalist. They covered Michael Jordan and Allen Iverson. So, that's why I was always wondering, like, when you sitting there and you seeing people go on TV discussing trades and contracts and free agent signing, does it get annoying when you see these conversations and they, like you said, don't have any context to it?
yeah, for me, it depends on the person.
Okay.
If I know you're a critical thinker and you really had the ability to kind of not blurt out something stupid, it's going to irritate me. But if you are one of them people that I just know you're a go hard, die hard fan,
Mhm.
and I'm not really going to put a lot of energy into it because that's your lifestyle. You get what I'm saying? And it ain't really worth my time. Now, even to your point though about the issue with you have with journalism, I think what makes it unique in this day and age is that there's kind of a piece for everybody. I think there's layers and different types of journalists, and from a marketability perspective, I do understand and realize that connectivity matters, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes connectivity can be love. Sometimes connectivity can be a disdain for you. But regardless, it's what sells, right?
Yeah.
And that's what those debate shows have really understood. So certain people hate Skip, certain people love it, but they watch him because of that connectivity, whether it's a love or hate relationship. I think sometimes that even works with athletes. I think that's why Floyd Mayweather made so much money, not just because he was a great talent, but it's because either people loved him or people wanted to pay to watch to see him take that out. But it was
Mhm.
that connectivity. So, and for me as an athlete or as an agent, it's always trying to figure out ways to create connectivity with the multiple silos of fans that you can connect with in different capacities because that is what increases your value of your brand.
Mhm. Now,
Sorry if I went on a marketing
no,
sidebar,
no,
but
no. That I love it. I love these kind of conversations. Um, it take me back to something though, because I didn't get to the point, and I should have. But when you talked about when you was in college and doing the marketing side, it took me back to the time when I first got to ESPN. Part of my job was to do sales quality control, and with sales quality control was I had to watch, and this was, so as a production assistant you're in a rotation, so my first part of rotation was watching college football games and making sure all of the elements ran, like from the producer's standpoint. So when you talked about being on the marketing side, it made me realize, like, yeah, making sure, like, if the Buffalo Wild Wings, the game presented by Buffalo Wild Wings didn't run, if the ads that was paid for didn't run, somebody, the producer would have got in trouble because, you just wasted a lot of money, you
mm-hmm,
know. And I always, wondered why we don't see a lot of sports journalism, sports production, and sports marketing cross, and even agency cross, cross reference more. You know what I mean? Because I do think it's an opportunity. Everybody can learn from somebody. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You being an agent, if you want to get your player on a show or a podcast, you call up the host. Hey, I got a player. This is who I want you to talk to. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. No,
So I
you're right.
would, just.
But I think agencies are starting to cross reference in other ways,
Hmm.
meaning they're starting to represent at multiple different levels. So
Okay.
now agencies aren't just representing the players, they're representing the coaches from college, they're representing the analysts, the Jalen Roses and those type of people. So they're kind of creating silos of allies indirectly that within, and now they're going to start representing some influencers, right? So
Yeah.
they're creating these different people that can kind of be allies to kind of help promote them in a different way.
Have you ever thought about getting into representing broadcasters and
Um,
analysts?
I would not be opposed to it. I know league we cannot represent, I believe, NBA coaches.
Okay.
I believe we can represent college coaches. And that's something I've been looking into, representing some college coaches. I wouldn't be opposed to analysts and broadcasters and those type of things because I think a lot about in this day and age, social media really has changed the dynamics of a lot of different things.
Mhm.
Um, and I've even had some conversations, not with that, but with our sports podcast. As a matter of fact,
Mhm.
not necessarily representing them, but as us being an agency, but also a marketing company, doing social media management and marketing for a sports legal sports. What is it called? I don't want to disclose the name because I don't know if they wanted me to put it out there yet. But
Okay.
basically, like the law of sports essentially type of
Mhm.
podcast, really talk about the legal aspects of the industry. So we're going to be doing some marketing for them, and I'm also going to be doing marketing not necessarily for journalists, but for like companies. like
Mhm.
some esports companies I'm going to be working with and those type of things. Um, but journalists for sure, I think, man, everybody can be a star nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like more people know. I don't know if you consider him a journalist, but more people know Joe Buttons, right?
Hmm.
Then they know some of the then who's a great Kevin Blackistone, who was a Maryland guy. He was a teacher at the
Shout
university.
out to Kevin, man. He's done
Yeah,
a lot for
yeah,
so many of my friends who went to Maryland. Shout out to Kelsey Nelson and Jesse, and so many of them who went to Maryland, and that's who they talk to. They talk about because he's a
yeah.
professor.
He's good dude. I met him a couple of times, and pre-COVID, I even had some conversation with him about trying to connect for something
Mhm.
during this period that I'm probably going to reschedule. Um, it's always been love as far as whenever we connected with him. He seems like he's really uplifting to the community at the University of Maryland as well.
Cool. Before I get you out of here, I gotta ask you this question, man. The show is called Breaking Through the Glass Ceiling. When was the moment that you broke through the glass ceiling, helping you understand like I'm where I'm supposed to be? I'm living my dream, and I'm on the right path.
I would say, man, the full transparency is when I got that congratulations letter from the National Basketball Players Association. And I'll tell you why, because I had some issues with the NFL. I didn't pass my NFL exam the first time I took it. And the
Mhm.
second time I went through a very complicated appeal process with the arbitrator. So for me, it was a journey, and it was also super refreshing to take the NBA examination. First time taking it, no issues, banged it out with over 80 passing grade. And it was like, okay, now you really you really control your own destiny. So for me, that was for me like, okay, now let's really turn up on a tenacity level. Let's get this ball rolling. So that was a very refreshing moment, and it was like confirmation that you're really in the process of achieving your goals. Um, for that for sure, no hands down.
Awesome,
That,
man.
that email was one of the best emails I ever received in my life.
I can imagine. Let the people know where they can find you.
Facebook, say Anthony Johnson. I'm on all of the platforms, but Anthony is just Anthony Johnson, maybe Anthony J Johnson, because I know my name is common. But on Instagram, it's just entrepreneur, ANTREPRENEUR. But instead of finding me, man, just check out our Renaissance Sports Group. So it's just REN Sports Group on Instagram, on Twitter, and Renaissance Sports Group on other platforms.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you connect with him. He has all the information you need, and if he don't have, he gonna make sure he help you. So make sure you connect with Anthony and the Renaissance Sports Group, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Tell your fathers, let's build.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed that conversation with Anthony Johnson. Make sure you follow the Renaissance Sports Group. Next week, I kind of stay behind the scenes in the sports business, but also move a little bit in front of scenes, and that is with my guest, Miss Karita Parks. Karita is the owner of Parks PR. She has a public relations background, and she's also transitioning. Well, I shouldn't say transition. She is a journalist as well. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear that conversation. Make sure you check it out. Make sure if you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button, folks. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Let the people know. Tell your friends about it. If this is your first time listening, I appreciate it. Check out some of the previous episodes with my other guests. And remember, do not let anyone set up a ceiling that you can't break through. This podcast was recorded and edited by B Waters Productions. The music by Hypno Beats. Make sure you follow him at Hypno_beats with a Z on Instagram.